Brian Barnett is just a regular guy. He's not a doctor. He has no legal license in any field of mental or emotional health. Brian Barnett merely shares the insights he's gained from his personal experiences for anybody who may choose to use such information as he or she personally chooses, while accepting full responsibility for his or her own individual thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and actions. Brian Barnett assumes no responsibility whatsoever for anybody's individual choice to expose himself or herself to any information that Brian Barnett shares. And by listening to this program, you're acknowledging that you, and only you, are responsible for your own thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back to the last Symptom podcast. I'm Brian Barnett, the creator and host of the show. I'm very happy to have you with me again this week. I want to remind you that the show is now available also as a video on YouTube and Rumble. And if I had my druthers, I would have all of you watching the video on Rumble. I mean, if you're going to watch the video, I'd prefer it be on Rumble rather than on YouTube. And the reason for that is very simple. I'm not ever worried about getting censored or locked out of my account on Rumble, but I am on YouTube, and it's actually happened to me on YouTube. If some of you might remember, not too awful long ago, I had a guest on who was Muslim, and we talked about some things about her being Muslim, and YouTube locked me out of my account for, I think it was 2 weeks. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even post a video to let folks know why there weren't any new videos. And, I just had no way of communicating with my audience. So I said to myself, that's the last time that's going to happen. So I went looking for other platforms, and, I've really been making full use of alternative platforms ever since, and really trying to grow my support on these alternative platforms. Well, let me bring you up to date on some things about me. My daughter's sick. She woke up with a sore throat, kind of not immediately, but later on in the morning, started complaining about a sore throat. So I made her some chicken noodle soup, pampered her all day, and we sat around watching Looney Tunes cartoons, the classic Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Looney Tunes cartoons. I can't watch any of the new ones. They're so dumb that I just can't watch them. So fortunately, I can still access the classic Looney Tunes like the ones that I grew up with. And probably it's what a lot of you all grew up watching too. What else? Daylight savings time come to an end here last Saturday night, Sunday. And it's really got me screwed up. I hate daylight savings time. I would just wish they would just keep the time the same all the time. It screws me up. It screws up my eating schedule. It screws up my work schedule. It screws up my internal system. It screws up everything. So not real happy about that, but I'm adjusting. Also, I've been working on a couple of bug out bags. I've really decided to put my nose to the grindstone and stop farting around and really get a couple of really nice bug out bags made and put together. And it's a lot harder than what you'd think. You think, well, you just throw a few emergency things into a backpack and then you're ready to go, right? But my mind doesn't work that way. My mind says it has to try to plan for every possible eventuality. And one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that you can create a bug out bag that is perfect for, let's say, wilderness survival. So let's say that there's a real worldwide event and you have to flee into the backcountry or something. You can create a bug out bag that's just perfect for that. And that would include like a lot of stainless steel or titanium gear, so that you could cook over an open fire and everything like that. But what if we're talking about the type of emergency that does not involve fleeing into the backcountry. Then we're talking about something where you might be in a hotel or something like that. And what do we know you cannot use metal bowls and that sort of thing for? Well, you can't use it in a microwave, right? So I'm trying to develop a system that has everything I need to be comfortable in a wilderness environment and at the same time do well in a civilized environment. So if I'm staying at a hotel and things of that nature. So that's what's taken me so long. It's just taken a lot of thought. And once I get my packs together, if you are interested in knowing exactly what I come up with, you let me know. Send me an email over at brianbarnett@thelastsymptom.com, and maybe I'll do a video on it or something. You've heard me talk about my friend Lambert. Well, I invited him to supper here in the next couple weeks. Sent him a message, said, hey, what do you think about coming over for supper? I'm going to have a couple other people over on this date. He said, yeah, sounds good. I'll be there. So that's going to be on a Friday. This past Friday, I was sitting here at my workstation watching some YouTube and doing some writing and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, I see this face peek in through the door. And I go, who is that? That looks like Lambert's son, Grant. And sure enough, it was. And so Grant, I wave him in. Grant comes in. Lambert comes in right behind him, carrying all kinds of stuff, carrying bags, big cooler. I said, what's all that stuff for? He said, what's all this for? He said, did you forget that you invited me to supper? I said, buddy, that's not for another 2 weeks. He said, oh my gosh. And he had to get his phone out and check to see if for sure I had told him a specific, future date, and I had. So I said, well, you're here. Let's go ahead and order pizza. And so we did. We ordered pizza, and we had a good time. He had brought some apple pie over. My goodness, it was good Amish apple pie, and we scarfed down the pizza, and we had a good time. The topics we're going to talk about today. When to tell others that you have a specific emotional disorder. So, for example, when do you say to somebody, by the way, I have borderline personality disorder? If we have time, we'll talk about, do emotionally healthy people experience insecurities? I'm going to address people who say that they don't perceive themselves as being devoid of worth. So they have borderline personality disorder, or they have some other specific emotional disorder, but they say to themselves, Barnett's always talking about how this means that I perceive myself as devoid of worth, and I don't do that. All right, we'll talk about that for a little bit. And also, kind of along the same line, people who say, I don't feel negatively about my feelings. Barnett's always talking about how this is rooted in a perception of feelings. I don't perceive my feelings in a negative way. Well, we'll address you too. The first topic, when to tell others that you have a specific emotional disorder. If you're thinking about this in the context of a romantic relationship, let me just say up front that if you have an emotional disorder, you have no business. You have no business searching out a romantic relationship. So that makes it pretty easy, don't it? That if you're not getting into a committed relationship, then you don't have to feel any obligation to tell somebody that you have borderline personality disorder or whatever it is you're dealing with. I'm not saying that you can't go out and have fun and go on dates and those sorts of things. I'm talking about committed relationships. You have no business, as long as you have not fixed this thing, addressed it, had time to completely eradicate it, you have no business being out in the dating world. It's like you having a sexually transmitted disease at choosing to have sex with other people. You're right, the time is not right. You need to get the sexually transmitted disease taken care of before you even put yourself into those sorts of situations. That's sort of what it's like having borderline personality disorder. What you're doing by going out and searching for a committed relationship is you're selfishly thinking only about yourself and not thinking honestly about what this is going to mean for the other person. If you're taking that into their life, you're taking that into their life. Also, if you're getting into a committed relationship with somebody while you have an emotional disorder, the only way that can happen is if that person also is pretty unhealthy, emotionally speaking. Given that those things are true, what's the point? What's the point of two unhealthy people getting into a relationship? You're just begging for pain. So in that context, the answer is you shouldn't be searching for a relationship anyway, so that there's ever a need for you to tell somebody, hey, by the way, I have borderline personality disorder. But in other contexts, so for example, your friends, people who've known you for a long time, people at work, those sorts of situations, when should you tell them that you have a specific emotional disorder? Well, in my experience, when I was just beginning to figure things out, and let me give you a little rundown here for people who don't know me. I had borderline personality disorder until I was at least 35 years old, and I didn't know that I had an emotional disorder. I didn't know that anything was out of the ordinary with me whatsoever. In fact, I thought I was completely healthy and normal and everything like that. After a major crisis in my life, I was forced to recognize that I did have an emotional disorder. And then I spent 7 years of my life in intense work on myself, trying to get to the root causes of what it was, understand where it come from, and to eradicate it. And I was successful in doing that. So I have some insights on these things that maybe a lot of other people don't have. So when I talk about, my personal experience, that might be a time to get out a pen and paper. In my personal experience, when I was just starting to figure things out, there are people that I wish that I would not have shared the details of my emotional disorder with. I understand this idea of, well, when do I tell somebody? I got to tell them, right? If I don't tell them, it's not being honest. But there's a lot of things that just because we could tell doesn't mean that we need to tell. There's a lot of personal things about ourselves that we could tell. Doesn't mean we necessarily are obligated to or that we have to. So, for example, if I got hemorrhoids sitting here recording this show, I don't necessarily need to tell you that I got hemorrhoids, do I? Recovering from borderline personality disorder is kind of like that. It's personal work that you're doing on yourself, right? So in most cases, there's no need to tell somebody that you have borderline personality disorder or an emotional disorder. Just no real need for it. At the time, it seemed to me like if I were to tell people, hey, I've got borderline personality disorder, and that's what I'm dealing with at work, among some other friendships and that sort of thing, I kind of thought that it would enlighten them and that this would translate into some understanding and patience directed toward me. But that's not what happened. That was not my experience. Instead, it seemed like most people perceived my telling them that as either a lame attempt to try to excuse certain behaviors, or they just simply didn't care, or they were unable to understand the significance of what I was telling them. And the result of this is that I felt more frustration after I told a lot of people than before I told them. And later looking back, I really wish I'd just kept my mouth shut and waited until I had my recovery process more firmly under my belt. We're going to talk about this a few times today, about this kind of anxiety to say a thing, reveal a thing. This is going to come back into play when we talk about this urgency to apologize to people. I understand it, and I'm telling you, time's on your side. So why be in a hurry? That's it. Time is really on your side. Don't be in a hurry. And that's the same advice I'd give you about revealing to people, casual acquaintances and family and that sort of, even your parents, maybe your parents don't know that you have an emotional disorder. And maybe when you find out, that's your first instinct is to run to them and tell them, hey, I've been living with this emotional disorder. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's going to be very frustrating for you. It's not going to improve your situation any. As many insights as you think you've gained at this point, trust me, there will be more. There's a reason why I didn't kick borderline personality disorder after 6 months. It's because I gained insights and I had to build on them. Then I had to search out more insights. Get those insights, build on those, see how they relate to the other insights that I had gained. So don't be in a hurry. Think about how regretful you're going to be if you say a lot of things to people now while you're still an infant, so to speak, as far as recovery goes and as far as being strong, emotionally speaking, goes. Think about how foolish you're going to feel if you do that now, and 3 years down the line, 150 times more than what you know right now. You're going to say, well, there was no reason for me to get into a hurry and start flapping my jaws off at everybody, because there was still so much that I didn't understand and I didn't know. It would have been better if I would have just waited those 3 years. Then if I still felt like I wanted to tell people these things, I could. So that's what happened to me. Looking back, I really wish I'd just kept my mouth shut and waited until I had some recovery experience more firmly under my belt and could then have a clearer mind and perspective on who to share that information with and who not to share it with. The reality is that some of the people that I shared kind of intimate things about my struggle and my life with really didn't deserve to know such personal, intimate things about me. But I was unable to fully understand and appreciate this at that time. But once that cat's out of the bag, it's out. Consider that. You don't get a second chance to decide who you are going to reveal stuff like that to for the first time. I hope you understand that. You don't get a second chance to decide who you're going to reveal things to. Once you reveal it to somebody, it's done. The cat's out of the bag. And later, if you go, gosh, I didn't need to tell them that, or gosh, if I had waited longer and understood more thoroughly what I'm dealing with, when I did say it, talk to them about it, I could have explained it much better. And some of those people now will continue to associate you with that disorder for forever. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that some people will do that. I know that there's people out there. I think about this all the time. People who were in my life during my own authentic recovery. At the beginning of it, when I was going through that crisis and everything, when they think of me today, they surely only associate me with how I was behaving, and all that craziness from back then during that crisis. And goodness gracious, I've changed. I mean, fundamentally, my life has totally changed. I have fundamentally changed as a person. So that's just a reality that happens. So don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry to reveal things to people that is unnecessary and that you don't maybe even fully understand at this point. Maybe there's more for you to learn. I just don't want you to feel like there's this pressure of time or anything like that, where you just must tell other people. The truth is, you don't have to tell anybody if you don't want. And at the same time, you also don't have to be ashamed of having an emotional disorder either. The people who are the types to stick by you are going to do so whether they have a name to put on your issues or not. Whether they know, well, Sally's dealing with borderline personality disorder. Whether she knows that or not, if she's the type that, is going to be a long-term friend or whatever, it won't matter. It won't matter if she knows that. I assure you this, that you're not going to regret anything by waiting until you've progressed further along in authentic recovery before revealing certain things to others. This will give you the experience and the clarity to make better decisions about how you want to reveal these sorts of things too. But by jumping the gun and sharing it with people early in recovery, there's a great possibility for regrets later. So why not just avoid the regrets altogether? Like I say, time is on your side. Do emotionally healthy people experience insecurities? Yes, we do. But here's the most important part of the answer. Emotionally healthy people don't have insecurities related to self-worth. This is the natural benefit of knowing that worth is inherent to simply being a person. Right? I've been talking about this a lot lately. Human worth is rooted in what you are, not in what you accomplish, not in how you look, not on any of these external things. It's rooted in the fact that you're a person. You're a person, and because you're a person, you just do have worth. It's inherent. And because it's inherent, as I've mentioned many, many times, it can't be dependent on external things, like the way your hair looks, your weight at any given time, the car you're driving, the clothes you're wearing, how attractive you are, or how attractive your boyfriend or girlfriend is. Those are all external things. Inner and inherent refers to an individual giving birth to it and generating a sense of it from within themselves, totally unrelated to anything external. And why? Because it's an inherent aspect of just being who you are, what you are. You're a person. So you can't earn inherent parts of yourself. Things that are inherent to you are just there whether you recognize they're there or not. That's the most amazing thing to me, is that for 35 years of my life, I did not perceive myself as having inherent worth. All that time, I still did have inherent worth. I just didn't perceive myself as it. And one amazing thing about people is that for all intents and purposes, if we believe a thing is, or believe a thing is not, regardless of what the reality is, our just believing that makes it so. So if I believe that I don't have inherent worth, then for all intents and purposes, I don't. Because the effect is the same. The effect is the same on me. My just believing that, it's the same as if I really didn't have inherent worth, right? It affects me the same, emotionally and mentally. It's very fascinating to me. Think about this. If I truly believe that oxygen is poisonous, if I truly believe that, 100%, it's a certainty that I'm just absolutely concretely certain about, then oxygen might as well be poison, because the effect on me, the effect that belief has on me, is the same. I still have to walk around, right, with a mask on. Still have to walk around in a hazmat suit. I still have to walk around being completely protecting myself all the time from air. And so the effect is the same for all intents and purposes. It's no different than if the wind just really was poisonous. And I can't walk outside the door. For real, I can't walk outside the door because I'll die. That reality, now you say that's not the reality, it's just something you believe is the reality. Yeah, but it's the same. The effect on me is the same. I still won't go out the door without a hazmat suit and an oxygen mask and all those things, right? Amazing. So when you're thinking about recovery and about all the effects that these things have on us, and you start to realize that none of it's true. All these things that have affected us so powerfully for so many years, none of it's true. Well, for all the years that we've believed that, it might as well have been true, right? Because the effect is the same. How beautiful it is to escape those lies, and then the world just opens up to you. Everything opens up to you. So you can't earn inherent parts of yourself. Things that are inherent to you just are there, whether you recognize they are there or not. And this true type of sense of worth can't be taken away either. For example, if I gain 50 pounds, which I think I did over during the pandemic, my worth isn't suddenly less as a person. Why not? Because true worth isn't dependent on external factors. Now, do healthy people sometimes experience insecurities? Yes, we do. And I mentioned this before in an orange slice, which are these abbreviated video insights that I do from time to time. If you ask me to disarm a nuclear bomb, trust me, I'm going to be insecure about that. Why? Because I don't know how to disarm nuclear bombs and I don't want to die. But if you put me in a large group of people on a day when my hair is messed up, my breath stinks, I got a big zit on my forehead, will I be insecure? Not anymore. Like I said, I have fundamentally changed. Because before, that would have been like the end of my life. That would have been so distressing to me. But not anymore. Now, honestly, if I have a big zit on the end of my nose, I can walk into a crowd of people in a formal event and I don't feel insecure. And it's all based on the fact that I know that my value as a person hasn't changed just because I have a zit on my nose. Also, I realize that those people, all of them, have had zits on their noses before. So a lot of putting things into context and understanding the way that our value as people, what it's rooted in, and the very nature of it, having an accurate understanding about that. I'm not insecure about the zit on my nose because walking into a group of people who are at a formal event with that zit on my nose, I know it has no effect whatsoever on me, who I am, and what I am. Would have destroyed me before. So my worth doesn't depend on what other people think of me, and it doesn't change based on what I'm wearing, whether my breath smells like mint, or whether my skin looks perfect that day. You know, true sense of inherent worth like that doesn't come and go, get greater or lesser. You guys have heard me talk about these things before. But I just wanted to answer that question about do healthy people get insecure? Yeah, I experience insecurity all the time. You know, if I were to get up and give a speech in front of 1,000 people, I would experience nerves and anxiety, but not because I'm worried about what people think of me. Rather, it would be more based on my preparedness, my expectations for myself, how I hope for myself to do, not on what other people are going to think of me. So there would be some nerves and butterflies and that sort of thing, but it wouldn't be based on what it used to be based on, right? It would be based now on expectations I have for myself, my hopes of how I might deliver that speech, how I have it in my mind, and how I want to live up to that expectation for myself, and whether or not I can live up to that expectation or not, right? But even if I get up there and I totally flub everything, my disappointment is not going to be based on, God, I'm such an idiot and those people are laughing at me, and I wouldn't even be thinking about those sorts of things, not anymore. I would be thinking about the disappointment of, gosh, I had a chance to really do something that I wanted to do, and I didn't live up to what I was hoping I was going to be able to pull off. Maybe I'll get another chance and I'll do better next time. That's how I would look at that sort of thing. In the end, the secret to achieving a sense of security and contentment with oneself is truly liking yourself. So it's not changing all the things that you hate about yourself. Rather, it's embracing many parts of what you do hate about yourself. Right? We're talking about unchangeable things. We're talking about things that just make you who you are. Like maybe you don't like the shape of your face. Maybe you don't like the sound of your voice, right? But these are aspects of you that make you who you are. And the secret to really liking yourself is not changing all those things, because a lot of those things are unchangeable, right? To change them would mean that you'd become somebody else. So the secret to really loving oneself is not changing all the things that you hate about yourself, because a lot of things in recovery are counterintuitive. You've been running the opposite direction. You've been running away from a lot of these things you hate about yourself for a long, long time. And for me to tell you that the answer is for you to stop running and to turn around and embrace those things, probably not easy to do. And I'm not saying that everything, like, that's the attitude you can have about everything. So, for example, you can't say, well, I have borderline personality disorder, and that's just a part of me, so you're just going to have to learn to accept it. No, because that can be changed. Borderline personality disorder is not an inherent part of what makes you you. It's something that you've learned and you've adopted, but it's not you. It's something that's unhealthy. It's something that's not meant to be there. It's something that you have the capacity to fix. You need to fix it. That's the attitude to have about that. But as far as things go that just make you who you are, things that are an inseparable part of just who you are, the answer to that is to stop running from those things and to turn around and embrace those. Accept them as, that is a part of me. I'm going to start loving myself even with these things that I wish were different. That's the answer to that. Before we go on, let me do the announcements today. TheLastSymptom.com is my website full of free resources. You can offer me a donation there if my work is beneficial to you and you'd like to ensure that I'm able to continue doing this. A donation is a good way to do that. And I just want to say thank you to anybody who's donated recently. Now, here's the thing about donations. I wish, there's a guy that I watch on YouTube. I think it's called Camping with Steve. Yeah, I think that's the name of the channel, Camping with Steve. And what he does, he goes out and he camps in just these weird places. Spends the night, for example, he'll spend the night in a drainage ditch. And then on the next episode, he'll spend the night behind a police station. And it's all this stealth camping. But one thing he does that I kind of admire is he'll run a list of names of people who've donated to allow him to continue doing what he's doing. And every time I see that, I think, boy, that'd be real nice if I could do something like that. But here's the thing. In the context of what he's doing, it works. In the context of what I'm doing, it don't work, because the subjects we talk about are kind of sensitive. And there's a lot of people who don't want their name out there, right? A lot of people would not be too happy if I said, hey, John Smith, nice long-time listener of the Last Symptom show, because then he might have workmates or whatever who says, hey, I heard you mentioned on the Last Symptom podcast. Why are you listening to that show for? Do you have an emotional disorder? Does your wife have an emotional disorder? Are your kids all right? And it's kind of not an ideal situation for me to start calling out people's names. And that's why I don't give shout outs like some of these other channels do. It just doesn't work for what I'm doing. And I hope everybody understands that. That's why I have to give a kind of a generalized thank you to people who have donated or who are thinking about donating. I really do appreciate it. It does help me tremendously. I offer some paid services at thelastsymptom.com, such as one-on-one phone conversations with me, one-on-one video Zoom conversations with me, and the Last Symptom Fundamentals course, which is a 2-week intensive pre-recorded online program. It's like taking a pre-recorded online course. It covers everything you need to authentically recover from an emotional disorder, the fundamentals that you can continue to build upon in your journey to do that. And last but not least, I want to mention locals. That's where all the Last Symptom social media is taking place these days. You can get there by going to thelastsymptom.locals.com. We'd love for you to join us there. Next topic. I have borderline personality disorder, but I don't perceive myself as devoid of worth, as you say. You say that at the root of emotional disorder is perceiving oneself as devoid of worth. Well, let me explain that. A lot of people wonder, how do I get from saying you don't perceive your value as being an inherent quality of being a person? You say, okay, but how do you get from that to I'm devoid of worth. That's quite a jump, don't you think? Well, let's use my iPhone here for an example. Those of you who are watching this on Rumble or YouTube can see that I'm holding my iPhone here. Does the iPhone have inherent worth? Well, no, it don't. It has worth as long as it's useful to me, right? And when the iPhone stops working, and it doesn't even have to stop working, that's the irony of it. It can just be outdated by 5 years. Think about that. My iPhone can just get outdated by 5 years, and then it's worthless to me. I can't even use certain apps. It won't even work on certain cell towers. It still works, but it has become useless to me, worthless. I have an iPhone sitting right over here on a shelf, an old iPhone. It's worthless to me. I can't even sell it. That's true. I've tried to sell that thing. I can't even sell it for $50. Nobody wants it. It's worthless. What happens is that if you take away the things that the phone can do for me, if you take those things away and you just consider the phone on its own, so imagine that it won't even turn on, doesn't work anymore, doesn't do anything. It's just this shell. It's just this shell of a phone, really. Just on its own, without anybody wanting it or without it doing anything for me, just on its own, weighed on its own merits. What value does it have? It has no value. It's just valueless. It's worthless. But let's say that we update it and we give it all these abilities and everything like that, and suddenly it becomes valuable again, doesn't it? So its worth comes from all these external sources. But if you take away all those external sources and you're just left with the phone that doesn't do anything, it won't even turn on, then just on its own merits, it's completely worthless. It's devoid of worth, right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about when a person perceives themselves that way, like their own value as a person has to come from external things like that. That's where all the worth comes from. That is the importance between viewing a thing as viewing ourselves as our worth coming from being inherent, and our worth not being inherent. If you don't view your worth as inherent, what that means, innately means, is that all your value has to come from external things. And if you take away those external things and you just consider you on your own, we just weigh you on your own merits, there's nothing there. You're just an empty shell of worthlessness. And that all happens in a person's attitude. The unconscious attitude, most of the times, such as in the case of this person who's asking this question, because they say, I have borderline personality disorder, but I don't think of myself as devoid of worth. Well, yeah, you do, because the two things are inseparable. You can't have borderline personality disorder and have an appropriate, accurate view of worth, of human worth. The two things are completely incompatible. If you had an accurate, healthy perspective on the true nature of human worth, you wouldn't have borderline personality disorder. It's as simple as that. So some things I want to mention here. You can't believe your worth as a person is not inherent. That is to say that it has to be earned, and at the same time, believe you're not devoid of inherent worth. That's describing an impossible scenario. Number 2, your current inability to perceive the reality that you do view yourself as devoid of worth. What is that evidence of? It's only evidence of your current inability to perceive it. That's your true attitude and belief system. You just don't realize that's your true attitude and belief system. So more work is required of you to continue thinking on this point until you can see the reality clearly. Because you can't eliminate what you can't see, right? See in the figurative sense. You can't eliminate, you can't identify, address, and eliminate what you can't even see is there in the first place. Number 3, shame is the feeling of being devoid of inherent worth. So when we talk about shame, that's what it is. Shame is, I'm irrelevant and shameful, devoid of worth. It's just we're detailing it. We're fully detailing it. But you could also just say it's shame, and that's what it is. Number 4, the person I'm replying to here described the idea of his worth as being determined by external things. And it's important to note that a person who feels that he or she has inherent worth doesn't view external things as being a factor in their worth. Right? Do you understand that? It seems obvious, but it's not obvious when you're coming out of these distorted belief systems. As long as you believe that your worth, that your personal worth as a person is in any way related to external things, any way, even a microscopic amount, if you believe that it is in any way related to external things, then you don't believe in inherent worth. You might think you do, but you don't. Nobody who believes in inherent value for people views external things as being a factor whatsoever in their worth as a person. Number 5, inherent means that a quality is inseparable from the thing itself. You know, rain is wet. So no external thing is required in order for rain to be wet. Rain just is wet. It always has been, it always will be. The two things are inseparable. Number 6, a person cannot be raised believing that their worth is dependent on external things and at the same time believe that they are inherently valuable. Understand that? We're just kind of repeating what we just said, but you cannot at the same time that you believe that your worth is in any way dependent on any external thing, what people think, what you've accomplished in life or what you haven't accomplished in life, none of these things, and at the same time believe that you are inherently valuable. You're describing an impossible scenario. It's two totally contradictory things. It's an impossible combination of things. It's like saying unwet rain, right? There's never been such a thing as unwet rain, and there never will be, because rain, by its inherent nature, is wet. Number 7, so anybody who believes their worth is a little bit dependent on external things is no different than the person who believes their worth is a whole lot dependent on external things. Do you see that? There's no difference. If you believe that your worth is a little bit dependent on external things, that's no different whatsoever than the person who believes that their worth is a whole lot dependent on external things. That difference does not make any difference whatsoever. If you believe it a little bit, you might as well believe it completely. Both of these individuals, the person who thinks that their worth is a whole lot dependent on external things, and the person who believes that their worth is a little bit dependent on external things, both of these individuals are existent in the same fictional reality where inherent worth is completely absent. Number 8, anybody who doesn't fully accept that they have inherent worth is living with the either unconscious or subconscious idea that they're inherently irrelevant and shameful, devoid of worth, whether they know it or not. Number 9, imagine an empty peanut shell. You ever go in these restaurants where you sit down, you order a steak, and in the meantime, while you're waiting on your food, they bring out these buckets of peanuts in the shell. You crack them, and then you can just throw the peanut shells on the floor. So imagine an empty peanut shell like that. That's the person who's been raised to misunderstand the nature of their inherent worth. They walk around like empty husks, and in order to genuinely feel any value, they're constantly on the search for a peanut to insert into their empty shells so that they can feel whole. Number 10, what these people don't realize is that they've always been a whole peanut. They've always been a whole peanut, shell and all. And the emptiness is a lie that was implanted in their minds. The emptiness is not really there. That's the tragic thing about it. The emptiness is not even really there. But do you remember what I said? If a person believes a thing or perceives a thing a certain way, then for all intents and purposes, as human beings, that it is that way. That's because it still has as much power over us as if it really were that way, right? So a person who believes the lie that was implanted in their minds, confusing them about the true nature of worth, the person that believes that lie, the effect of that, of believing that, on them is the same as if it were true. But it's not true. You've always been a whole peanut. That emptiness that you're feeling is not even really there. Think about that real hard between now and the next show. The emptiness that you are feeling is not really there. You feel it's there. You feel it strongly, but it's not there. Not really. You're a whole nut. You just had some very, very bad emotional teachers who have planted some lies in your mind. So in short, there's no believing that external things have a little bit of effect on our inherent worth, while at the same time having an accurate perspective on the true nature of our inherent worth. One either lives with the foundation concept that they are inherently valuable, or they live with the foundation concept that they're devoid of worth, and that their worth is dependent on external factors. Never both things together. Not even a teeny tiny, itsy bitsy tiny little bit. All right, now we've talked about the person who says, I don't perceive myself as devoid of worth. Let's talk to the person who says, I don't feel negatively about my feelings. Not recognizing that you see your feelings as inherently irrelevant and shameful, devoid of worth, is not the same as not seeing your feelings as inherently irrelevant and shameful. Did you catch that? Not recognizing that that's how you view them is not the same as saying that that's not how you view them. So I understand many may believe that they have a perfectly healthy opinion of feelings. I felt that I once believed the same way. But eventually I had an awakening to the reality of the matter. That was an epiphany I had early on in my recovery that allowed me to get from there to here, was that at some point I had to see things that were right under my nose my entire life, but that I was not even aware of. I didn't even know that about myself, that I viewed certain things in certain ways. So it's not my responsibility to convince everybody that their foundation beliefs are distorted. That task falls to each individual in the work that they're doing for themselves. But I can say the following unequivocally. If you have the symptoms reflective of these underlying unhealthy beliefs that we're talking about, if you have the symptoms of those beliefs, then you live with those beliefs. There's no other possibility. It doesn't matter whether you recognize that you live with those beliefs or not. Your attitudes, your behaviors, your actions, the way you interact with the world is proof positive of it. In other words, our thoughts, behaviors, feelings, reactions, all these things are always perfectly reflective of our foundation perspectives, our underlying belief system. Therefore, if the way they manifest reflects emotionally unhealthy underlying attitudes and belief system, that's really the unhealthy attitudes and belief system you live with. If you lived with healthy, accurate attitudes and you had an emotionally healthy belief system, well, then all of your thoughts, behaviors, feelings, and reactions would be undeniable evidence of it. It's a mirror. We're talking about a mirror here. Whatever you see in the mirror, whatever's being reflected back to you, it's reflecting exactly what your real attitudes are. That's what your behaviors, your actions, your thoughts, the way you interpret the world around you, and those sorts of things, the way you interact with the world around you. It's all a perfect reflection of whatever your true underlying attitudes are. They never contradict each other because it's a mirror. You never get into a perfectly good mirror and look at yourself and go, no, that's not how I look. That's not how I look at all. My hair's not brown. My face don't look like that. I look like Robert Redford. And the guy I'm looking at here in the mirror doesn't look like anything like Robert Redford. This mirror is lying to me. You never say that because you know that whatever's being reflected back to you, it's a perfect representation, right? Well, that's our thoughts, behaviors, feelings, and reactions. They are a perfect reflection of what our true underlying belief system and attitudes are. And I call that the law of genuine attitude reflection. If you take the Last Symptom Fundamentals course, that 2-week intensive course I was telling you about, I talk, I think, quite a bit about the law of genuine attitude reflection. And basically it goes like this. The way you naturally behave around a thing cannot contradict what the true underlying attitude is that you live with in relation to that thing. So, for example, bees. Have you ever seen anybody who was allergic to bees? I have. Years ago, I was driving to a nearby town, and as I was coming into that town, so I was coming out of the country and into that town, I saw a guy painting. He was up on a ladder painting a house, way up on top of this ladder. And all of a sudden, he started waving his hands, and he jumped from the top of that ladder all the way down, boom, hits the ground, went rolling across the ground, jumps up, crazy, same thing, swatting his hands all through the air and everything. So I pulled over. I thought the guy was having a stroke or something. I really thought he was having like a medical emergency. And I guess he kind of was. But I pulled over. I said, hey, buddy, you all right? He screamed at me, I'm allergic to bees. There's bees. I'm allergic to bees. And he just went running through the yard. He said that, and then he just disappeared. He went running off. I was going to let him into the car, but he didn't stick around. He just took off. I'm allergic to bees. Clearly, his behaviors and actions revealed an absolute truth about what his underlying attitudes and beliefs are about bee stings. Right? Would we have seen him leap off of a 2-story tall ladder, roll on the ground and act ridiculous in public like that if his belief system was that there's nothing to worry about with bees? Oh, I'll get stung a few times, but I'll be all right. No, clearly that was not the belief system that he lived with. When I saw him, he wasn't twirling around laughing with his arm outstretched like the Sound of Music. The guy was in a panic. And that's the law of genuine attitude reflection. It doesn't work any differently when you see how people treat themselves, right? If you see people treat themselves terribly, don't take care of themselves, they don't look out for their own best interests, they neglect themselves, things like that, and then they say, oh, no, I love myself. No, I don't like myself. No, you don't. No, you don't, because the law of genuine attitude reflection. If you did love yourself, we would see the exact opposite of what we do see. You would be taking care of yourself. You would not be neglecting yourself. That's what a person who truly does love himself or herself, that's the way they behave naturally. How about how people interact with others, how they react to the feelings of others. Their behaviors and actions are practically screaming out to you what the true underlying attitudes are that they live with. But people who don't know any better seem to have a hard time putting 2 and 2 together. They're too thrown off by what the person says that contradicts everything you're seeing. So, for example, people who say, I love you, while 99% of their behaviors and attitudes and reactions and interactions with folks don't reveal love at all. So they're telling the girlfriend, at night when they're lying in bed all lovey-dovey, yo, I love you. But the whole day and the whole week, their reactions, behaviors, actions, interactions have not reflected that. The girl says, but he says he loves me. He says he loves me. And then they go into cognitive dissonance, where what they're being told does not match at all the facts of what they're seeing. But, whereas I don't want to say sane person, but whereas an emotionally healthy person would look at the evidence and draw the accurate conclusion. He doesn't love me. He's just saying he loves me, but he doesn't. The unhealthy person does not do that. The unhealthy person tries to make excuses, tries to come up with explanations for why this person can do things that love does not allow, and explain why that person can still love them. That's cognitive dissonance. Not only is that person's behaviors not reflective of authentic love, but those behaviors are in fact totally contradictory to what love is. In other words, authentic love, would not even allow for such behaviors. But the woman wants to believe what she wants to believe, doesn't she? And the guy's saying that he loves her, so cognitive dissonance kicks in, and she begins to come up with all these ridiculous explanations that make no sense whatsoever for why he can mistreat her and why that can still be love. It's cognitive dissonance. Again, I was once the person denying that I had negative notions about the value of feelings. However, this was only proof of my denial or my inability to perceive it due to a lack of understanding, not proof that my subconscious view of my feelings was healthy. To determine if one is living with these fundamentally unhealthy attitudes and beliefs, it's not enough to simply examine what we believe we believe. I know that's a little confusing. It's not enough to simply consider what we think, what we believe. Instead, we must over time compare our thoughts, behaviors, feelings, reactions to the unhealthy belief system and see if it matches. If it matches, that's the belief system you do live with. This is how one experiences a slow awakening that, wow, yeah, this distorted belief system has been sitting in there all this time, and I was completely oblivious to it. So, I'm half asleep. It got real late on me. It's the human condition, right? I'm tired, and my brain's not working right now, and I feel like I'm leaving stuff out. So anyway, I'm not going to draw this out real long tonight from this point on. I'm just going to say I hope y'all all have a great week, and appreciate you listening to the show. Hope you do something nice for yourselves this weekend. If you haven't thought about what you're going to do, now's a good time to start thinking about it. And I'll talk to you folks next week. All right? Y'all take care.